Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Friday. It's time once more for Romance and Modern Mythology, and this is our last for our November installments where I was just looking for couples that had really good, wholesome, universally enjoyable themes and relatable characters and all that. So I thought we would go out with my absolute favorite for this month, which is Anne Shirley and Gilbert Blythe. Now, the novel Anne of Green Gables was published in 1908 by Lucy Maud Montgomery. In 1985, there was a miniseries called Anne of Green Gables, and then a year or two later was followed by Anne of Avonlea, they loosely followed the novel series. Anne was played by Megan Follows, and Gilbert Blythe was played by Jonathan Crombie. Now, Anne Shirley is an orphan. She was mistakenly taken from the orphanage and sent to live with a brother and sister who were named Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert, and they lived at a place called Green Gables. They had intended to adopt a boy to help Matthew with the chores and the farm, someone who was young enough to be raised properly and also given a good education, help out the Cuthberts, and they in turn would help this person out. Instead, here's Anne. She was originally allowed to stay kind of on trial because Matthew just saw her, took a shine, and thought she was, the most wonderful, delightful child, and he was always in favor of keeping her. Marilla was a little bit more on the fence, but ultimately he got his way, and she just joined the family. Gilbert Blythe is a schoolmate of Anne's, and he gets a very dramatic introduction to Anne's personality. Now, Anne, if you are familiar with the story, has red hair, and I personally find it really, really becoming. I think red hair is gorgeous. But Anne doesn't think that way. She feels extremely sensitive about it. It is literally her least favorite thing about herself. Now, Gilbert, being a teenage boy who's just trying to get the attention of a conspicuous new girl at school, called her carrots. Anne was furious. She stood, shrieked, "How dare you!" and then broke her slate right over his head. And it was those old-fashioned, school slates where they used to do their work. It's just whack. Now, Gilbert is more stunned by this turn of events than he is hurt. That's not usually how the girls in his community generally reacted to him, even when he was teasing. He actually tries to apologize to his credit, but Anne raises her chin, ignores him, and then she goes on to a quest to beat him to the top of the class in every school and coming first in every subject. And this pretty much sets the tone of their relationship for the next few years. Now, as they get older, Anne gradually and very slowly starts to thaw towards Gilbert. She was definitely one for holding a grudge, in addition to having a rather pronounced temper. But there was an incident that changed the tone of their relationship. On Anne's side, Gilbert had always consistently tried to make friends, or at least be friendly. He was genuinely sorry for upsetting her. But the incident in question involved a shipwreck. Now, in an effort to act out one of Alfred Lord Tennyson's poems, I believe it was The Lady of the Lake, Anne and her friends get a boat, and then they lay Anne out with flowers because she's pretending to be Elaine, who we know she was floating down, the river towards Camelot, after she died of a broken heart. So they lay Anne out, and she's all situated, and they push the boat out. And the idea is that the boat would drift to the other side of the shore. Anne would be safe and sound, and they just had the fun of having an impromptu play on a nice afternoon. That's all that it was. But what happened is that the boat sprang a leak. Now, Anne's friends panicked. They thought she had drowned, and they went dashing off to get help. Anne managed to actually bail out the boat until she got to a bridge, as she abandoned the boat, and she clung to one of the poles that was holding the bridge up. A few minutes goes by, and then comes along Gilbert in a rowboat. He sees her in this peculiar situation and is quite amused by it, and he asks what on earth she thinks she's doing. And after a sarcastic reply, he helps her into the boat, and he starts rowing her ashore. But on their way over there, they start to iron out a few of their difficulties, and he even ends up getting her to promise that they'll be friends from here on out. So then Anne and Gilbert, they've both finished with their public schooling. They were making plans for college because both of them, were very intelligent, very academically oriented and driven people, and they had achieved a great deal. And Gilbert's plan was ultimately to go on to medical school. But Matthew, who, loved Anne and who Anne loved very, very dearly, he died. And after that happened, Marilla was contemplating selling the farm. Now, Anne had arranged to get a teaching position that wasn't too far away, and that she would take her college classes by correspondence, and that way Marilla wouldn't be so alone because she'd be able to go back and forth on weekends, and so Marilla wouldn't sell the farm. Gilbert was also going to take classes by correspondence, and he was going to teach locally at the same school where they had come up. But when he heard about Anne's situation, he consulted both of the school boards, and he arranged for him and Anne to switch schools so that she wouldn't have to leave Marilla or Green Gables at all. Pretty big gesture right there. Now, time passes, and in this period of time, Gilbert and Anne have grown quite close, and it was noticed by everyone who was in their circle. Gilbert actually ends up proposing twice. Anne does turn him down. She says that she's afraid they'll end up doing nothing but fight and that they would regret marrying. It would just be this horrible situation. So she says no. Gilbert is understandably hurt. Anne is also hurt because, he's angry with her. Their friendship's messed up and all this. And they end up going their separate ways. Gilbert does go off to medical school. And after one of the it was a neighborhood acquaintance of Marilla's. She had recently been widowed by the name of Rachel Lynde. Rachel moved in with Marilla, and then Anne accepted a teaching position in a private school that was some distance away. So, we're all out in the world now. Now, the next time Gilbert and Anne see each other, it's by chance. It's in a park. It's during the winter. They're sharing each other's news. Gilbert is engaged to someone else. Anne has been offered a 5-year teaching contract where she's at, and she's also she's been writing again, and she's on the verge of publishing some fiction. And it just looks like they're going to be separated for forever, but, they're parting as friends, and, it's just kind of sad. But then by the time summer vacation comes around, Anne has decided not to accept the contract from the school in favor of writing full-time at Green Gables. She wants to come home. Then she finds out that Gilbert is also back home. He had caught scarlet fever while he was at medical school, and she just immediately goes to him. And she also has a copy of her first book that's getting published. She wants to show him. She just wants to see him. Gilbert tells Anne during this visit that he broke up with his fiancée because it wasn't fair to her. Anne is just horrified. She's afraid that Gilbert believes that he's going to die. And she just says, you're going to get well. You're going to get through this. And that's when Gilbert tells her that the reason he ended the engagement and the reason it was unfair for him to be engaged to this other person is because his heart belonged to Anne completely. So after he fully recovers from his illness, he proposes to Anne again. This time she gladly accepts, and the road to happily ever after began. And there are various books that talk about their married life. If you're interested in reading them, there's also several miniseries that depart considerably from the books, but they're still enjoyable. You're still seeing these beloved characters, and I think that they kept with the same actors through all of them. So it's just something that's very sweet and wholesome, and it goes to show that just because two people aren't really getting along in childhood doesn't mean that they can't come to a more friendly arrangement once they're all grown up. It's the friction in the oyster that makes the pearl, as has been said. But yes, that's the completely wholesome and charming story of Anne Shirley and Gilbert Blythe. I think they're a beautiful example of a couple who is so similar to one another. Their temperaments, they actually have a great deal in common, and that's what binds them together. And there's just enough differences to keep things interesting for them. But I mean, the more you watch the miniseries, the more you read the books, the more you realize that those two could not possibly have ever belonged to anybody else. They were fated for one another. Love the story. I've been enjoying it ever since I was a kid. So that's it. So much for November. I haven't quite decided at the time of this recording what couples I'm going to be showcasing in the month of December. So you'll have to come back for that. But for now, if you would like, please join us at Blackbird's Brew. It's a Discord server. There's a link to join in the description box below. And of course, subscribe, leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.